Ladies and gentlemen, I am Jameus Mooney, an editor at Bodyslam. I'm here with one of our best contributors, Kiley Fuller. Today, we will be discussing the situation with Cody and Brandy Rhodes no longer being all elite. Kiley, anything to add to that?
It's just a crazy situation. I'm still trying to organize my thoughts into something coherent because I didn't see this coming, and I don't think anyone saw this coming.
I definitely did not see it coming. I didn't realize the situation between Cody and AEW was that harrowing,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, the reports have been, Cass reported last year, our co-managing editor, for those who don't know, that there was a rift between Cody and the rest of the elite that was probably irreparable. Um, I just didn't expect Cody to actually leave. I know we've
Yeah.
discussed before the idea that Cody was kind of on his own isolated island because everybody in AEW interacts with each other and each other's storylines except for Cody Rhodes. Um, and it's been that way since the start of the pandemic. He cut that one promo hyping Blood and Guts in the first empty arena show, and then he never really did anything with anybody other than his feud again after that. Which is it's a jarring juxtaposition for me as a viewer when that's the only guy on the show who regularly is doing something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know where Cody fit just in general in AEW at this point in time, but I didn't expect him to leave. Um,
I didn't. It's just I didn't expect him to leave, and I do understand that there's a rift between Cody and the EVPs. And Sean Ross Sapp said there's a rift or distance between Cody and the AEW locker room, but I'm not sure if this was a factor in him leaving, if it was primarily financial, because WWE has a lot of money at their disposal. And so if that is true and Cody is in talks with WWE, it makes sense with the new baby and his family and everything that he would go for more money. I'm also kind of interested in the implications this has for the Cody Rhodes will he, won't he heel turn angle, because the fans have been clamoring for the Cody heel turn. He's been adamant in promos that he's not turning heel, but he's kind of teasing a heel turn, doing heelish things. The whole teasing the heel exit on the ramp, and the crowd is booing him. And I wonder if maybe that's a factor in it. If maybe he just wasn't creatively satisfied in AEW, the way that we see so many people who aren't creatively satisfied in WWE.
the Cody booing the first time I noticed it, and this is as somebody who did most of the daily play shows during the pandemic, was the first time I noticed it was at the Go Home show for, I want to say, Double or Nothing. It was the show where we met. Was that Double or Nothing? Some of
Yeah,
these events.
that's the weigh-in angle, isn't it? With the
That's the
go-go.
Anthony Agogo. It
Yes.
was that when the random fireworks and people were popping more for the
At
fireworks
the
in the
baseball
background.
stadium. Yes, yes. That was
Yeah,
double or nothing.
people were popping more for the fireworks in the background than they were for Cody Rhodes.
Yeah.
And I thought at first that it was they run this territory so much that people are just getting tired of the character. It wouldn't be mainstream in other areas, but it's become every arena in the country at this point that they run. One of the worst was the Orlando Dynamite a couple months ago. The Dynamite that wouldn't let MJF talk. That
Yeah.
same show when Cody was the main event. After the show, Cody cut a promo about talking about his dad, and that was the only time the crowd went, maybe we should stop booing him. And
I Sorry, go ahead.
so for Cody, it's obvious. I don't think the heel turn was ever something they planned, but
Hmm.
it's something when your character doesn't do anything likable, and he's just kind of there for 2 years, and there's no character development. Eventually, people are going to get tired of the shtick.
Yeah, and I think the entire weird mid-card sort of angle he had with QT Marshall and the Nightmare Family and the factory and all the different people that got drawn into that, I don't think there were a lot of people who actually enjoyed that. I think after the Agogo angle, all of that was just unenjoyable. And the people in it are enjoyable, but I just think people wanted desperately for Cody to do something new. And it's you can, even if you liked it, you can't deny that Cody had cooled off substantially from his Chris Jericho feud, sort of the heights of that, the Silver Spoon promo, all that went into it. And he cooled off, and he didn't. AEW and Cody Rhodes did nothing to buy back interest, and what the fans wanted was a heel turn, and it didn't happen. So I'm not sure if Cody was ever going to recover in AEW as a babyface. So if he doesn't want to be a heel, I think leaving is the best thing he could do from a creative standpoint. But then there's also the chance that he's not going to be wrestling.
Yeah.
He is getting older. He's talked, maybe he has a few years left. There's always a chance he'll go to WWE or NWA or, Ring of Honor, any of these places, and maybe have sort of a backstage role and wrestle part-time. That's always a chance.
For Cody, I don't think there's a great creative fit anywhere, because for me, and I'm speaking strictly as a fan right now, for Cody Rhodes and Brandy to a lesser extent, who is also leaving, we should add, Cody Rhodes, all of the AEW's angles that didn't go well with the audience, then that weird faction Brandy had at the beginning of.
What was that called?
I forget what it was called.
The Nightmare Collective, wasn't it? Yes.
It was Nightmare something. Yeah, Nightmare Collective. The Cody QT. Cody. Anything Cody's done last year, all of their angles that have fallen flat, you can tell have that Rhodes influence. So I don't know if, and this isn't a knock on Cody. I'm sure there were other factors. I don't know if creatively he's the best fit for anywhere, because his track record recently hasn't been there for me.
That's a fair point. It confuses me because Cody, when he was in the Bullet Club and doing Ring of Honor New Japan, I thought he was very creative. I thought he was putting out a lot of original things. And I think his feud with Kenny Omega was Cody's best feud of his career, hands down. Now I'm questioning, is that because Cody is creative, or is that because there's a lot of people behind him? And if that's the case, then Cody is better off in WWE. Granted, if he's protected in WWE and he is given a good spot and he has, all the bells and whistles, and that he typically didn't get in WWE before.
The interesting thing, and there's a couple of things here with WWE that I want to hit on. What happens tonight on NXT? Like, what's one of the big marquee matches for the Vengeance Day?
I don't even know who's in the final, but you have the Dusty Cup that's the ending soon.
Finals of the Dusty Cup are tonight, on the day where Dusty's son becomes a free agent. I think.
But do they put him on NXT 2.0 though?
I don't think you need to have him handing somebody a trophy doesn't necessarily mean that's his brand designation if he inevitably signs, but I think it is a possibility to where, if now that WWE knows for a fact he is available tonight, that they fly him in. Now, I'm speculating. I have no sources that indicate this for our listeners, but that is something I went, when looking at tonight's card for something entirely different, that maybe that's something that happens tonight.
I could definitely see them trying to do it. And I don't know where Cody's head is at. I don't know if he's had talks with WWE. Apparently, some people in WWE and outside of WWE think he's going to go there. I don't know because I'm not Cody Rhodes and I'm not Brandy Rhodes, but I think that would be a good spot to bring him in. But I think there's a better story to tell in teasing it and sort of if he's going to debut this week and doing it on SmackDown because I think you pop a big number.
I think SmackDown is definitely the landing spot.
Mm-hmm.
For me, when I think of why Cody left in the first place, if I remember correctly, his intention was to prove he's not trapped in this bubble that they had put him in, to where
Mm-hmm.
he doesn't need to be mid-Carter with a mustache or mid-Carter with face paint. He is a main event caliber star, and for him, he had to go prove that. So for me, I think he's proven it, and that may be why he wants to go back to see if the narrative has changed. But I sent you a message earlier on what I would do if I were WWE and I get him, and it starts to SmackDown. The match for Cody Rhodes at WrestleMania needs to be Drew McIntyre. You can draw off their history in WWE. They were former tag champions, although nobody really remembers that. But Drew's last match on the Independents before returning was against Cody Rhodes. And it was Drew McIntyre's run on the Independents after he got released that gave Cody Rhodes the confidence to go, the industry is starting to change thanks to Drew McIntyre. I can help change it. I can reinvent myself the way he's doing now. And then I can come back down the road. The difference between Drew McIntyre and Cody Rhodes is that Cody Rhodes took a much bigger leap of faith after leaving. And for Cody, he can come back and say, one of my best friends made a massive change, and I wanted to continue to see that change grow, and I did that. And now I'm back to change the foundation of the industry, the leader of the industry, and change this company. And then he can call out Drew McIntyre and go, that's the difference between us. Because when you had the opportunity to come back and change the company, you became everything they wanted you to be. And there's your story. That's the easiest story to interject Cody right back into the mix. And it's on a big network, at the biggest show, against one of the few people they presented as a top star the last couple of years. So that immediately puts him in that main event picture with a compelling story. And for me, that would be the match.
Yeah, I think there's also the possibility that if Cody does go to WWE, as it seems he's likely to do, I think we have to consider the possibility that this is him getting one last run. Because I don't think it's a coincidence that in the Malachi Black angle, we saw him, taking off his boots, talking about retirement. I don't think it's a coincidence. He's been talking about it in interviews, slowing down, retiring soon. And if he wants to end his career in WWE, that would be the way to do it. You could also run back, some old hits, some of his most noteworthy feuds. I think you could also do a very good program with Seth Rollins. I think they would have a great match.
I think the match is excellent. I think that's something you need to get to eventually. I just don't see a better instant comeback story than Drew. And the only other two stories that I see Cody already has written for him are Randy Orton. And that's if he goes to Raw. But Randy, I would much rather see them revisit that later because I would like to see Riddle get the Orton rub at Mania.
Mm-hmm.
I think that story deserves a payoff and not a pivot. Or Triple H, but we don't know how healthy Triple H's heart is. So it kind of leaves Drew as that one clear. Of course, you can make a story for anybody. And Seth Rollins would be a tremendous match. But
yeah, I just want if he does go there, I just want him to stay far away from Roman. I don't want Cody Roman at any point in time. I think that would be a disaster for both of them.
I'm not going to respond to that. I think we both know how I feel about this Roman Reigns story. I've made it clear on episodes you and I have done in the past, that while I think Roman himself is outstanding, every single person he works with does the exact opposite of benefit,
Mm-hmm.
which ultimately it's not a good story. Um, but at the end of the day, there's a lot you can do with Cody in WWE. Of course, there's the possibility he also doesn't go back.
Yeah, he could go anywhere. I think any company would love to have Cody Rhodes. He's an AEW former EVP. He, look at everything he did in AEW, getting younger talent over Darby Allin, Sammy Guevara. He did a lot for AEW. And if you're a company that's New Japan trying to expand into America,
New
or
Japan's a great spot.
yeah, or you're even like an Impact. I don't know what kind of money they have, but even Ring of Honor, when they come back, having someone like that who's a veteran, who knows the business and knows how to get the most out of young talent who may not have the most experience, I think you shell out all the money you have for Cody Rhodes. Are they going to outbid WWE? That's no. It's not going to happen.
At the end of the day, I think that's why WWE is likely, because Fightful Select report noted that monetary reasons were what that they couldn't agree on the fiscal aspect of the deal.
Yeah.
So, but that's exactly why Cody Rhodes was so vital to AEW. I don't think they need him now, but
Oh,
guys
no.
like him and Jericho were so important in the early days of AEW because they provided that experience of having been on TV as top players, knowing where to help different young talent. Uh, Sammy Guevara is not where Sammy Guevara is without Cody Rhodes. Darby
No.
Allin, Orange Cassidy is another one. There's so many.
The entire TNT title, the whole thing.
Everything that we can give Cody Rhodes content the last year and a half a lot of flack, and I think there's a lot of areas where it's deserving of that criticism. But what he's done for the talent in the company makes him the most important one of the most important people so far in the young history of the company.
Yeah, and I think it was Meltzer said that AEW has a talent budget and what Cody wanted financially didn't fit, but WWE can easily give him that. I would like to see him do coaching or producing or something like that for the same reason, because I think he's so valuable as someone for young people.
And of course, his dad did that in
Yeah.
NXT. You have people like Becky Lynch and Sasha Banks both who said that the only reason they weren't released is because Dusty went to bat for them and then worked hands on with them. And
Mm-hmm.
those are the two biggest stars in women's wrestling today, arguably wrestling in general today.
Yeah, you can't deny that Cody Rhodes has a brain for wrestling, and I credit that to the family he grew up in, because he's just like his dad was in a lot of ways, and he's just like his brother. I'm interested about what this means for AEW, though, because Cody was the guy who sort of took the young guys, had their first major feud, and helped them get over. I don't know who else is available to do that besides Chris Jericho.
It's weird because Cody was in a weird position where everything he did felt recluse from everything else on the show, but everyone he worked with was on the cusp of going from that mid card to main event scene. Um, so he was kind of the gatekeeper to the main event, to where he was strong enough to take all of the losses to an MJF.
Yeah.
Which he's been very important to Max, to a Darby Allin, and all of those guys, and be what propels them into that main event scene. I don't know if there's anybody else other than maybe Jericho who can step into that role, but Jericho's contract is up soon too.
Yeah, and Jericho's in the middle of this inner circle angle. So if Jericho does leave, I think Jericho's going to retire in WWE. I should go ahead
I
and
do
say
too.
that. I
do
think there's
too.
I think there's very slim chance he retires in AEW and stays retired and doesn't go back to WWE.
And
I
I think
think
that may be why they're splitting the inner circle now. With
it
this
could
contract
be.
coming up, give the story a payoff.
It could be. I also think the inner circle should have split a long time ago, but that's for another video.
I think we agree they should have split after losing to the Pinnacle.
Yeah, 100%. But that's for another story. You could do something like that with CM Punk, but the issue with that is you have to put CM Punk in the title picture first.
Thinking of it, you could do it with Bryan Danielson's the guy you do it with.
Yeah, you could.
Especially since he's already starting to call out the Daniel Garcias, Lee Moriarty's, and guys like that, the Wheeler Yutas. Bryan Danielson is the perfect wrestler for making himself look strong in every loss he takes, but not making the opponent look weak in every win he takes.
Yeah, I think it's going to take a while because they're going to have to work harder to get people to boo him because anyone who beats him now, I think there's a section of fans that isn't going to like it just because they're so ready to cheer and do the yes chant and all the things. He's kind of doing some heel things, but I don't think he's getting booed in a productive way.
He got booed in the program with Paige.
Yeah.
The first promo with Adam Page, they booed him. I don't know. I think his character is kind of in an in-between phase because if Bryan Danielson wanted to get booed, Bryan Danielson would be getting booed. He came back from a supposed career-ending head injury and had the best run of his career right after as a heel. I think if he tried hard enough, he could get booed. I just don't know outside of Adam Page how much of it is necessary, especially as they're teasing a team with Moxley. Because if that goes a different way than we think, he's going to need to be cheered for that.
Maybe I'm in the minority of this, but I don't want to see him in a team with Moxley.
I don't either, but a lot of people do apparently.
Okay. There's veterans and what does this mean for Arn Anderson and Lee Johnson and
You
Brock?
know what I would like to see for Arn Anderson? I would like to see him and Tully make up so that they could actually have the tag team.
I thought you were gonna say I want him to wrestle Tully. My heart dropped. I was like, absolutely not.
I don't think Tully can bump anymore.
No, I am not in the business of watching people get murdered on television. And Arn would Arn would do a spine buster, and that would be it for Tully. He'd be done.
So circling back around to Cody. Mel, I don't know if you listened to The Observer last night.
Not last night, no.
Dave last night specified that Cody was leaving when he brought lawyers to a negotiation and they couldn't come to a deal. It wasn't until this morning that the news broke and picked up a bit of wind behind it. But
yeah, I think Cody, from what the reports that I've seen, I think Cody wants more money than AEW can give him, which more power to Cody. I never fault someone for going out and getting paid what they think they're worth.
Absolutely.
I'm just not sure his time in AEW was over. I think it's a little weird that Brandy did that promo segment with Dan Lambert, and now we're just not going to hear anything about that. I would love to see Dan Lambert come out and cut a promo talking about how Paige Van Zant, drove Brandy Rhodes out of AEW. That would be incredible. I still want her to match.
I'm putting this out there. I am glad we get no more Brandy Rhodes, Dan Lambert.
That segment was a disaster.
But I don't think AEW actually ever anticipated Cody on leaving. It's evident by a handshake deal and giving him the championship on a handshake deal that AEW thought everything was fluid long term. But at the end of the day, you have Brandy Rhodes and Cody Rhodes, you're going to use them. I just don't think they expected him to actually balk at
Yeah.
when they I don't know what the word I'm looking for here is. I'm gonna stop talking. I think you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, well, here's the thing, they tried to use them. Like they put Cody and Brandy in different angles, especially when Brandy came back after having the baby. It's just that nothing was gelling with the fans. The fans didn't want any of this. The Sammy ladder match,
It
that
was
was an excellent.
fantastic.
It was fantastic, but people didn't want this little rematch to happen. The interim championship thing was weird.
I don't
And
think, and again, that's where I go back to with Cody and creative. That felt like a Cody Rhodes idea. The interim
yeah,
championship felt like something out of 70s NWA.
yeah.
I thought the whole story was ridiculous and dated and stupid. The match was fantastic. The story made no sense to me, and the booking of it was just egregious.
I agree. It was confusing. The match was great, which kind of made up for it. Like I'm willing to ignore the logical inconsistencies for the great match. But I agree that I don't think AEW thought Cody was leaving because Tony Khan talked in an interview about how he has lifers and people who are signed and they're going to be there for life because they're committed to AEW. And you'd think that Cody would, as a founder, would be one of those guys, but I guess not.
The only lifer, I think, is Kenny.
Should I say something controversial?
Go ahead.
I don't think Kenny's a lifer. I think
Okay,
Kenny.
explain.
I think when Kenny's nearing the end of his career, he leaves AEW and retires in New Japan.
Oh, I thought you were going to say he goes the AJ Styles way, and that would have been controversial.
Oh, I didn't even think of that. That's how like other. That's just not. That's out of left field, but like left field, like on another planet. Like that's how much I didn't foresee that. I think the Young Bucks could be lifers, but I'm
They
not.
could be, but I see them jumping before they retire. They seem like the kind of people who want one e-run just to say they did it.
Maybe I don't want to pretend like I know anything that's happening.
I don't either.
Because I don't.
For reference, we have no sources. We're just speculating.
Yeah, we're just speculating. I just think it's clearly AEW did think that Cody was going to stay and that eventually they would reach terms. I don't fault Cody for going for money because, like I said, he has a baby now and he has things that he has to worry about. I'm concerned about the community stuff, the branding stuff. Brandy was chief brand officer, the reality show, all these other things that Cody was building around AEW that were kind of AEW adjacent. And now,
No big show.
Yeah, and now Cody's not in AEW. Are we still going to get those things? Who's going to be chief brand officer? So someone mentioned Leva Bates because
Leva Bates would be fascinating.
She's been working under Brandy, but is she ready for an executive role like that? I don't know.
I know that Luke Harper or Brody Lee's wife is taking over the community outreach stuff, which I think is fantastic.
Yeah.
Amanda Huber's great at that kind of stuff. I think that's a perfect hiring for that.
And clearly AEW had plans for who was going to take over stuff when Cody left. Because Amanda Huber's, she's already there. She's ready to do stuff. I don't understand why.
Having a contingency plan for somebody leaving an executive role is just good business.
Yes.
Whether you think they're leaving or not.
Yes. And I'm not sure because, there's reports, I think Cass reported this, that the EVP roles weren't what they were at the beginning, that they're far less, they're scaled back roles. And I don't think that included Brandy. So the CBO role, I'm worried about that. I don't think it's going to affect AEW that much business-wise, but I just hope they have a plan in place because this isn't just a wrestling in a ring. These guys were executives. They had important roles.
And I don't know if it's the like Rhodes to Tap, that kind of stuff is interesting because for a couple reasons. I don't know if they specifically went for Cody and Brandy, and it was just like, oh, Rhodes to the Top's an obvious name. Let's call it that. Or if like Brandy, the chief branding officer, decided we're the most marketable, put us on the show. So maybe they would be willing to do something, another reality show with somebody else. Who knows? The interesting thing about that is Meltzer, before all of this, reported that it had been renewed for season 2. Of course, the way TV production works, you can cancel for any reason at any time, even after you're done shooting. So TNT hasn't announced it yet. You could easily retcon those reports and go, plans change, because in the TV industry, plans do change and they change often. But I don't think he can keep a TNT show heading over to WWE, who works almost exclusively with NBC.
Oh, that's a good point. I don't think they're going to keep Rhodes to the top, and that's if he goes to WWE.
Of course.
Like we have to preface this: it's not confirmed he's going to WWE. Everything is rumored and speculation at this point. But
yeah,
WWE had to have offered him something really big for him to ditch reality show money, go big show money, his executive role, his wife's executive role, both of their talent roles, and all the other connections they've made doing charity work and community work. So if he is going to WWE, I hope he's getting everything.
I think you could get a reality show, because NBC's already given WWE a reality show on USA and multiple reality shows on E! Network. I think Cody could easily get a reality show if he really wanted one, working with NBC, who does a lot of reality television content anyway. I just don't know if that would fall under a breaching contract with TNT over Rhodes to the Top, because it's a direct competitor.
Yeah, and I don't know anything about this business stuff. I don't know anything about business law. I'm sure someone's going to see this and be like, well, actually, I don't care. I don't care.
You'll get well actually for anything. That's just society nowadays.
The number of people who well actually me on a daily basis is staggering.
I've seen the comments on your Facebook.
Well, moving back to Cody Rhodes, this news, maybe we should have seen it coming, because the news that he was a free agent dropped in, what was it, January? His deal was
up at the end of December.
Yeah, maybe we should have seen this coming, that he was leaving. Him going to WWE is shocking to me.
And of course, that's not confirmed.
Yeah.
He has the connections in New Japan that he built before AEW, in that kind of little in-between phase between WWE and AEW. But he also made those connections with Ring of Honor, where he's a former world champion, and with Impact. What I don't know is if Ring of Honor has the funds, because as far as I've heard, they're going to be a super indie when they come back. I don't know if you can warrant the Cody Rhodes money for a super indie. The connections are there, though.
Yeah, I think it would be interesting when he left WWE and he had that list of things he wanted to do and people he wanted to face. I think it would be interesting to see him do an indie run in 2022, because the indies have changed so much since 2016. And I think it would be so interesting to see him in a GCW and a Ring of Honor.
Cody Rhodes versus Effie.
Yeah. Put him in Warrior Wrestling, do all the, sort of Northeast Wrestling, all
Beyond
these
wrestling, Black Label Pro, places like that.
Yeah, have him do all the things if that's what he wants to do. I think Cody Rhodes on the 2022 independent scene would be extraordinary, especially if Brandy's his valet. I think she's incredible as a valet.
Maybe we'll get a Warhorse match that doesn't make Warhorse look like a joke.
So someone call Warhorse and tell him to push for it.
Do you know what bothers me? Speaking of that Warhorse match, if you remember, right before the match, Danhausen sent a video telling Warhorse to punch Corey in the groin. Which is why I was so happy when Danhausen's debut ended with Orange Cassidy punching Adam Cole in the groin, because somebody finally took that advice. And it happened that he took it on Danhausen's debut, which I thought was a nice touch that nobody really went back to. Um, Danhausen never called Cody Rhodes Corey on TBS.
That's a
Sad.
missed opportunity, Tony.
Tony Elite missed the opportunity.
Someone call Tony and tell him of all the opportunities you missed with Cody, this is the one we're most mad about.
But there's a lot there with Cody. I've noticed too in interviews since the report that he's a free agent has dropped, he's discussed his WWE run more in interviews. Like the other day, he did an interview, and the biggest quote coming out of it was how much he loved working with Rey Mysterio. Which, of course, everybody's going to obviously love working with a guy like Rey Mysterio. But he was talking more about the Rey Mysterio feud than his AEW stuff.
Yeah.
Which kind of just made me scratch my head a little bit. As great as that feud was, you know.
I also... New Japan is interesting because New Japan is starting to open up more to AEW. I'm not sure. I don't know if there's bad blood still between New Japan AEW, New Japan the Elite. I do think it makes more sense business-wise if New Japan had to choose to stick with AEW instead of bringing Cody in.
I do too.
But if New Japan can bring in Cody and still have the relationship with AEW, I think it would be interesting for Cody to go to New Japan and, build himself up, have all these great matches, and then Forbidden Door himself back into AEW. I think that would be interesting.
You know what I would like if you did that? If you go back to the promo in the feud with Jericho, he said as long as he's an AEW contracted superstar, he will not go for the World Championship.
Yes.
But if he's a New Japan contracted superstar as a heel, that would be his way to get out of that.
Yeah, well, of course, all this is contingent on him not going to WWE.
Of course.
But I think there's more interesting stories to be told outside of WWE for Cody than inside of WWE, because, like you said earlier, it's the Drew McIntyre match, and then what? Like, what do we do?
Randy Orton, and that's about it.
Like, do we do Cody Roman Reigns? I hope not.
And this goes back to WWE lacking top stars that they haven't built since he left.
You could do Cody Rey Mysterio.
Again? Like,
I guess.
The matches were great.
Cody was in WWE for so long, and the big stars in WWE have remained stagnant for so long. You're going to have to do a lot of rematches. Like, there's not a lot of originality left for him there. Even years later.
Going back to the New Japan point, I believe they were angry for the first little bit of AEW over Kenny Omega leaving. And you can tell kind of ever since Kenny Omega left, they've kind of struggled to replace Kenny Omega despite how much they've grown. Like you can tell they're trying to recreate the Okada Omega trilogy every main event since that has been 45 minutes to an hour ridiculously, because that's what Kenny and Okada did it so well, and they kind of want to recreate that magic, and it's just not there. And then you can tell by some of their booking philosophy has changed significantly. Like, they tried to shoehorn Evil into the main event scene just to try and get another Okada, because if you remember 10 years ago, Okada came back from the excursion and in his second singles match under a new character won the championship, and everybody was scratching their heads. And it pretty much saved the company as time went on. I think they were trying to shoehorn somebody else in similarly to how they did Okada, just to have another top star. I don't think they expected Omega to leave. And I think they were just left scrambling to shuffle the deck a little bit. But over time, specifically during the pandemic, some high-end executives in New Japan changed a bit and they became a lot more open to sending talent over. And I
Yeah.
think as you're expanding to the US, having that working relationship with AEW is imperative, because as you build New Japan strong as a brand, you can send AEW guys over to help promote the show. So if
Mhm.
Cody going to New Japan is contingent on demolishing that relationship with AEW, I don't think they do it.
Oh, I don't think they do it either. I think there's, and this is an interesting point, and it relates back to what you said. When Kenny Omega and the Elite left New Japan was struggling creatively. They were stagnant for a long time. They couldn't really, they tried Jay White, but he really wasn't ready to be Kenny Omega.
He
Will
did
Os-
great, just not in a Kenny
yeah,
Omega role.
Will Ospreay wasn't ready to be Kenny Omega, and New Japan really suffered for it. And I think they're starting to come back a little bit, but they're going to have to do a lot to gain more interest. And I think AEW is a good way for them to do that. But it speaks a lot to AEW's focus on young talent that Cody's leaving and Kenny Omega is still out, and we still have a strong show. Like, they're putting on some of their best shows because they've gotten a lot of guys over. There's a great depth of talent in AEW. So I don't think we have to worry about AEW at all.
I've seen a lot of discourse regarding AEW's roster. And I think one of our writers, editorial writers, put out a piece in the last day or two regarding whether or not AEW's roster has gotten too bloated. But at the end of the day, this is why having more talent is always better than having a few guys, because with Kenny Omega gone, Cody Rhodes removing himself from the picture, it does not feel like they're missing anything. When a year and a half ago, either one of those guys being out would have put the show in the dumps.
Yeah, when Kenny Omega and Jon Moxley were both out at the same time, if that was AEW in 2020 or AEW even in 2021, it would have been a disaster. But I think AEW, maybe this is a controversial opinion, I think AEW was one of the few companies that thrived in the pandemic and outperformed itself week after week during the pandemic without fans. And I think that
AEW
they
could
really,
have easily died if they had taken a wrong turn in the
yeah,
pandemic.
I think they really buckled down and said, we're going to be in Jacksonville for the foreseeable future. This is where we build. This is how we build our company. And I think they really benefited from it. And we're seeing that now with Sammy Guevara and Darby Allin and MJF and the entire Pinnacle, which is just an incredible angle on Wardlow is everything. And they brought in Christian Cage and they brought in all these guys. And I think if Cody was ever going to leave, this is the right time to do it.
You'll appreciate this. Speaking of the Pinnacle, so I mean, for our listeners who don't know, I met her before either of us joined Bodyslam at a show a year and a half ago, something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
And her and her sister were just cheering on Sean Spears. Insanely. So the other day, the person I was with at that show, at those two shows, sent me a random picture of me in 2017 in a Ty Dillinger shirt doing the 10.
He's the best. He's so
I used
good.
to be the biggest Sean Spears mark.
I'm still the
I
biggest.
laughed and I almost sent it to you, and I'm just like, no, that's not a great picture of me.
He's the best. The Pinnacle is the best faction in AEW. And anyone could argue with me about that. I don't care. They are.
You know what's great about the Pinnacle? It's too often in wrestling you fall into the trope that, and I tweet about this every time I cover Dynamite on the main Bodyslam Twitter, which if y'all have been enjoying our Twitter coverage lately for shows, it's been yours truly. Cheap plug. Anyway, so every time, too often in wrestling, they fall into the trope of, we're no longer teaming, we're no longer best friends, I hate you. Part of the reason AEW feels so natural is because all of their characters have natural relationships. The Pinnacle aren't together every week. You don't see Sean Spears with the robot FTR every week. But when FTR needs somebody You
Yep.
see Sean Spears. You see MJF. You see Wardlow. That's what's great about it. The only two that stick together are the two that every week are the two teams that were together before, Wardlow and MJF, and FTR and or Cash and Dax. But they're all still friends who have each other's back when you need it. And it feels so natural because I don't see my friends every week, but when they need something, I'm there. When I need something, they're there. It feels like a natural relationship, which doesn't happen often in wrestling. When they split factions, it has to be a breakup or we hate each other now, let's feud. The Pinnacle haven't done that, and it allows for more character depth and better stories going forward
Hmm.
because you can do more with that when they have natural allies built in, so it's not forced later on.
Yeah, and when they are all together, it's something major, like when they were beating up CM Punk, or it was last week they had that big celebration. It's important. It's important if they're all together. That's what I just love the Pinnacle. And I love the Elite, and I love the House of Black. I love all the factions.
Except in the circle.
Don't start. I
What
listen.
about American Top Team?
Listen. I am also an MMA fan, and as an MMA fan, I feel obligated to say that I don't like American Top Team.
Circling back to Cody, we should probably wrap up here soon.
Yeah,
Final thoughts.
I hope wherever he goes, he's happy and creatively fulfilled. I hope that in the future, maybe he comes back to AEW, retires in AEW, gets the veteran treatment. I think this is what's best for both parties. I think AEW doesn't need Cody. Do they want Cody? Of course, he's Cody. I think they don't need him anymore. I think he doesn't need AEW. I think he needs to focus on what he wants to do instead of building a company. So wherever he goes, he's going to be great.
I agree with that stance. Cody Rhodes needed AEW in the sense of he needed to prove that he can be a top guy in a big pond, and AEW needed Cody Rhodes when AEW needed top minds, top performers to establish themselves out of the gate. Both of them got exactly what they needed from the party, and while both would be fine sticking together,
Mm-hmm.
neither is at a detriment when they part ways, which is a perfect contract. Both parties get what they want, what they need. Everybody feels valued, and then you just leave amicably. Too often you don't see that in wrestling. Um, I think there's a lot that Cody can do anywhere he goes in New Japan or WWE. Um, at the end of the day, he has a family and a daughter to look out for. Maybe WWE can bring in the reins on the type of promo he cuts. Like some of the tangents he goes off on can be a little winded and a little controversial at times. Maybe he's somebody who would do better under the WWE style of promo. Not a lot do, but certain guys do better. So maybe that can be him if he goes back. I just hope he's happy wherever he is. I hope he makes bank. Uh, Too many people in this country don't fight for what they feel they're worth. So I'm glad. So while I'm not necessarily glad he's leaving AEW, I'm glad he looked at himself and went, "I'm worth this. I'm not settling for less." I think that's a great message to send to people. Anything where before we go off air, where can we find you? Social media, stuff like that.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Fuller_Kiley. I tweet about wrestling and I have a lot of fun. You can see me on bodyslam.net. And the YouTube channel, I do ADH Divas on Sunday at 6. I do random interviews, GCW shows, all like just random stuff on Bodyslam. You can also find me on Fightful Overbooked every Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern for Demo Divas. We cover women's wrestling, we grade promotions, we talk about major news, we do some fantasy booking stuff, everything women's wrestling.
And all of it's fantastic. You can find me on Twitter at the Jameus. um, where I tweet about wrestling a lot and a lot of arrows on just everything. I tweet about a lot of other things too. So if you want to follow me, be prepared for random takes on really old music, or really old movies, or random pictures of my dog or cat. Although my cat hates it when I take a picture, which I relate to way too often. I tweet about other sports a lot too. You can find me at Bodyslam. I am an editor here at Bodyslam. I also cover news. I do a lot of different shows. I sometimes cover live shows on Twitter. Um, we just started our GCW Game Changer Weekly podcast where Cassidy and I, our co-managing editor, we'll go over any news, shows, stuff like that. I do a lot of the post shows. Sometimes I tap on Bad Blood, who does our Raw, SmackDown, AEW post shows. I do a lot of GCW post shows. I recently started a new series on New Japan Strong, an interview with Carl Fredericks dropped last week. Be sure to listen to that. We talk about a lot. I have an interview coming out with Chris Dickinson in the same series. Really good interview. A lot of fun. Be sure to check that out when it drops. And then I have a couple of other shows I'm really excited for coming up that aren't announced yet. So be sure to follow me for announcements on some really cool projects that I'm personally really excited for. From Bodyslam, I'm the Jameus. That's Kiley. Peace.